I, Kai Thornfield, reject Arya Blackwood as my mate. The words hit me like silver bullets, each one tearing through my chest as the mate bond I'd waited 22 years to feel snapped like a broken chain. Around us, the entire Crescent Moon pack watched in stunned silence as their future alpha's brother publicly destroyed me under the harvest moon. But it was the disgust twisting his perfect face that nearly brought me to my knees. May the moon goddess find her someone more suitable, he finished, his steel-gray eyes boring into mine with such revulsion that I actually stepped back. The ceremonial circle erupted in whispers. Some shocked, others satisfied. After all, what did anyone expect? The wolfless freak getting a mate, especially one like Kai Thornfield, had always been a cosmic joke waiting for a punchline. I'd just gotten mine. 6 hours earlier. You missed a spot on the alpha's boots, freak. Bethany's blade pressed against my throat as I knelt scrubbing the kitchen floor, her voice dripping with 5 years' worth of practiced cruelty. 5 years since my parents died saving some stranger from rogues. 5 years since the pack decided their heroic deaths were somehow my fault. 5 years of being the only adult wolf in pack history to remain wolfless. I'll fix it, I said, keeping my voice steady even as the silver nicked my skin. You better. Tonight's the harvest moon ceremony, and if you embarrass this pack, I won't. The lie came easily. Everything about me embarrassed this pack. She released me with a shove, laughing as I sprawled across the wet floor. Good. Now finish cleaning and get ready. Even freaks have to participate in the ceremony. I spent the afternoon scrubbing and polishing, my hands raw by sunset. The pack house buzzed with excitement as unmated wolves prepared to meet their destined partners. Designer dresses rustled past me, expensive cologne masked anticipation, and everywhere I looked, hopeful faces glowed with possibility. None of them looked at me. I changed into my only decent dress, a simple black number from a thrift store 3 towns over. Nothing like the flowing gowns other unmated females wore, but it was clean and whole, which was more than I could say for most of my wardrobe. The ceremony took place in the sacred grove, where ancient oaks formed a natural amphitheater under the massive silver moon. I hung back in the shadows, as always. No point in participating in something that would only bring humiliation. That's when it hit me. The scent slammed into my consciousness like lightning, pine and earth and something wild that made my knees weak. An invisible cord pulled tight in my chest, tugging me forward with irresistible force. Mate. After 22 years of emptiness, the moon goddess had finally answered my prayers. I stumbled forward, following that intoxicating scent through the crowd. Pack members turned to stare as I pushed past them, shock rippling through the gathering. The wolfless freak, participating in the ceremony? It was unthinkable. The scent grew stronger until I could barely think straight. And then I saw him. Kai Thornfield stood at the center of the circle, his massive frame rigid with tension. Everything about him screamed power, from his dark hair catching moonlight to the way other wolves instinctively gave him space. As the alpha's younger brother and the pack's strongest warrior, he was everything I wasn't. Strong. Respected. Wanted. His steel-gray eyes locked onto mine across the clearing, and I watched his nostrils flare as he caught my scent. The mate bond snapped into place between us, so strong it nearly knocked me to my knees. For one perfect, shining moment, hope bloomed in my chest. Then his face twisted with disgust. No. The word exploded from his lips. The moon goddess must be mocking me. And that's how I found myself here, watching my mate, my rejected mate, look at me like I was something he'd scraped off his boot. The ceremonial circle remained silent as I stood there, the hollow ache where our bond used to be spreading through my chest like poison. Some pack members looked shocked, others satisfied. A few even seemed amused by the spectacle. Somehow, I managed to keep my chin up as I walked away. Somehow, I managed not to run. I made it to the gardens behind the pack house before my legs gave out. Collapsing onto a stone bench, I finally let the tears fall. 22 years of hoping, and this was what I got. The universe's cruelest joke. Arya. I spun around to find Kai standing in the shadows, his massive frame blocking out the moonlight. How had he moved so silently? How long had he been watching me fall apart? What do you want? I wiped my face, hating that he'd seen me weak. He stepped closer, and I caught that pine and earth scent again. Even rejected, the mate bond still sang in my veins, calling to him like a siren song. I want to explain, he said, his voice rough. What happened back there, it wasn't personal. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not personal. You publicly humiliated me in front of the entire pack. Because I had to. He moved closer still, close enough that I could see conflict warring in his gray eyes. I'm going to be alpha someday. I can't have a wolfless mate. It would make me look weak. So you thought you'd spare my feelings by rejecting me like garbage? No. His voice dropped to a growl. I thought I'd offer you something better. I stared at him, not understanding. Be my mistress, he said, the words hitting me like a slap. Hidden away, just for me. I can't resist your scent, Arya. Even now, even after the rejection, I want to pin you against this wall, Anne. I didn't let him finish. My knee connected with his groin with enough force to drop a smaller man. Kai doubled over, cursing creatively in 3 languages. Let me make something clear, I said, standing over him as he wheezed. I would rather die mateless than be your dirty little secret. I would rather spend the rest of my life alone than give you one moment of my time. I turned to leave, but his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Even injured, his grip was iron strong. You'll change your mind, he said, his voice strained but certain. The mate bond doesn't just disappear because I rejected you. You'll feel the pull, the need. And when you do, I'll be waiting. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back at his face. You're right about one thing. The bond doesn't disappear. Which means you'll feel it too. Every day, you'll want what you threw away. Every night, you'll dream about what you could have had. I leaned closer, close enough that my lips almost brushed his ear. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that you chose pride over love. That you chose the pack's opinion over your own happiness. I hope it's worth it, Kai Thornfield. I really do. I pulled free and walked away, leaving him kneeling in the garden dirt. This time, I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard him whisper my name like a prayer. Or maybe like a curse. Chapter 2. I drove through the night like I was running from hell itself. Maybe I was. The pack house disappeared in my rearview mirror as I pushed my ancient Honda harder than it had any right to go, putting miles between myself and the worst night of my life. The rejection still burned in my chest like acid, each heartbeat a reminder of what I'd lost before I'd ever really had it. I, Kai Thornfield, reject Arya Blackwood as my mate. His words echoed in my head on repeat, accompanied by the memory of disgust twisting his perfect features. Even now, hours later, phantom pain shot through the place where our mate bond had been severed. It felt like losing a limb I'd never known I had. By the time I reached the neutral territory city limits, dawn was breaking over the horizon. I'd driven 6 hours without stopping, fueled by nothing but rage and the desperate need to escape. My gas tank was nearly empty, my bank account wasn't much better, but for the first time in 5 years, I was free. No pack. No rules. No constant reminder that I was the wolfless freak who'd gotten her parents killed. I found a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city and paid for a week with cash I'd been saving for emergencies. This definitely qualified. The room was small and shabby, but it was mine. No one could hurt me here. No one could reject me here. I slept for 12 hours straight and woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror showed hollow eyes and pale skin, the stress of the past day written across my face in brutal detail. The small cut on my throat from Bethany's blade had already healed, one advantage of whatever wolf genetics I'd managed to inherit, but the invisible wounds were another story entirely. I spent the next 2 days wallowing in self-pity and room service, but by the third night, cabin fever was setting in. I needed air. I needed noise. I needed something to drown out the voice in my head that kept replaying Kai's rejection. The neutral territory was a haven for supernaturals who didn't want to deal with pack politics. Vampires, witches, and wolves all mingled freely here, bound by treaties older than any of us. It was also home to some of the most exclusive clubs in the region, places where beings with money and power came to play. I had neither money nor power, but I had plastic in desperation, which would have to be enough. I found a dress in a boutique that cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a month, a deep emerald number that clung to every curve and made my dark hair look like silk. If I was going to have a breakdown, I might as well look good doing it. The club I chose was called Sanctuary, and even the name felt like a sign. The bouncer was a vampire with ancient eyes who looked me up and down before nodding toward the door. No questions asked. I liked the neutral territory already. Inside, the music pounded with a bass that I felt in my bones. The crowd was a mix of supernatural species, all beautiful, all dangerous, all radiating the kind of confidence I'd never possessed. I made my way to the bar and ordered something strong and fruity that tasted like it could strip paint. First time here? The bartender was a witch, her purple hair gleaming under the club lights. Is it that obvious? She smiled. You've got that deer-in-headlights look. Don't worry, it'll wear off after the second drink. She was right. By the third drink, the rejection hurt a little less. By the fourth, I was actually enjoying the music. By the fifth, I was swaying on my bar stool and considering doing something incredibly stupid. That's when I saw him. He stood at the VIP section's edge, and even in a club full of supernatural beings, he commanded attention. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with a predator's grace that made every instinct I had sit up and take notice. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his suit probably cost more than my car, and when he turned toward the bar, I caught sight of eyes that stopped my heart. Golden. Not the amber gold of most wolves, but pure, molten gold that seemed to glow in the club's dim lighting. Our gazes met across the crowded room, and the world tilted on its axis. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, but it was more than that. Power radiated from him like heat from a bonfire, and I watched as other wolves in the vicinity instinctively lowered their heads. Even the vampires gave him space. This was an alpha. Not just any alpha, this was the kind of wolf that other alphas knelt to. And he was looking at me like I was the only person in the room. I turned back to my drink, heart hammering. Men like that didn't notice women like me. Men like that had perfect mates with perfect wolves and perfect lives. Men like that. You're running. The voice was dark velvet over steel, and when I looked up, he was standing right beside me. Up close, he was even more devastating. The scent of him hit me like a drug, pine and authority and something uniquely him that made my wolf side purr with appreciation. Wait. My wolf side? Excuse me? I managed to say. Running, he repeated, signaling the bartender for 2 drinks. From something, someone. The question is what? What makes you think I'm running? Those golden eyes studied my face with an intensity that made me squirm. Because you're drinking alone in a neutral territory club wearing a dress that costs 3 times what you wanted to spend, and you keep checking the exits like you're planning an escape route. He was right on every count, which was both impressive and annoying. Maybe I just like expensive dresses and strategic positioning. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, transforming his face from dangerously beautiful to absolutely devastating. Maybe. Or maybe you're hiding from something that hurt you. The bartender set 2 drinks in front of us, something clear and expensive looking that probably cost more than my motel room. I don't drink with strangers, I said, even as my hand moved toward the glass. Gabriel, he said, extending his hand. Gabriel Romano. Now we're not strangers. His hand engulfed mine, warm and calloused and sending electricity up my arm. Arya, I said, then immediately wondered why I'd given him my real name. Arya. He said it like he was tasting it, rolling it around on his tongue. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman. I snorted. Right. Because I'm sure you say that to all the girls. I don't. His voice was serious now, those golden eyes boring into mine. I don't say things I don't mean, Arya. Ever. There was something in his tone that made me believe him. Something that made me pick up the drink and take a sip. It burned going down, but in a good way. So what's your story, Gabriel Romano? You don't exactly scream local. Neither do you. What pack? No pack. The words came out sharper than I intended. His eyebrows rose. Lone wolf? Something like that. We talked for an hour, dancing around the edges of truth. He was visiting on business. I was taking a break from home. He had responsibilities waiting for him. I had nothing waiting for me at all. The drinks kept coming, and with each one, the pain in my chest dulled a little more. Gabriel was easy to talk to, surprisingly funny, and when he looked at me, I didn't see pity or disgust. I saw something that looked almost like hunger. Dance with me, he said as a slower song began to play. I should have said no. Should have finished my drink and gone back to my motel room to wallow in peace. Instead, I found myself nodding. The dance floor was crowded, but somehow Gabriel carved out space for us. His hands settled on my waist like they belonged there, and when I looked up into those golden eyes, the rest of the world faded away. Tell me what happened, he said as we swayed to the music. What makes you think something happened? Because you're here alone, drinking like you're trying to forget something, and there's pain in your eyes that has nothing to do with alcohol. I considered lying. Considered making up some story about needing adventure or wanting to see the world. Instead, maybe it was the drinks or maybe it was the way he was looking at me, but I found myself telling him the truth. I found my mate tonight, I said quietly. He rejected me. Publicly. In front of our entire pack. Gabriel's hands tightened on my waist, and I felt rather than heard the growl that rumbled through his chest. He's an idiot. He's practical. I'm not exactly mate material. Why? Because you're here instead of there? Because you're strong enough to walk away from something that was hurting you? Because I'm wolfless, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. 22 years old and I've never shifted. I'm broken, Gabriel. Defective. Why would anyone want that? He stopped dancing then, his hands coming up to cup my face. The music continued around us, but we stood still in our own bubble of space and time. You are not broken, he said, and there was something in his voice that demanded belief. You are not defective. You are perfect exactly as you are, and any man too blind to see that doesn't deserve you. Tears pricked at my eyes. You don't know me. I know enough. His thumb brushed across my cheek, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I know you're brave enough to leave everything you've ever known rather than accept less than you deserve. I know you're beautiful and intelligent and stronger than you think. And I know that any pack stupid enough to let you go deserves whatever's coming to them. Gabriel. I started, but he was leaning closer, and suddenly I couldn't remember what I was going to say. Let me take care of you tonight, he whispered against my ear, his breath sending shivers down my spine. Let me show you how you should be treated. How you should be treasured. I should have said no. Should have been smart and careful and responsible. Instead, I said yes. His penthouse suite was everything I'd expected, modern, expensive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city lights. But I barely noticed the decor because Gabriel's mouth was on mine the moment the door closed behind us. He kissed like he was claiming me, deep and possessive and hungry. His hands tangled in my hair, and I could taste the whiskey we'd been drinking on his tongue. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. Are you sure? He asked, golden eyes searching my face. I answered by pulling his head back down to mine. He was gentle despite the power that radiated from him, taking his time to worship every inch of skin he revealed. His touch was reverent, like I was something precious instead of broken. When he whispered my name against my throat, it sounded like a prayer. I'd never felt beautiful before that night. Never felt wanted or desired or treasured. In Gabriel's arms, under his golden gaze, I felt like a goddess. We made love until the sun started to rise, and for those few hours, I forgot about pack politics and rejections and being wolfless. For those few hours, I was just Arya, and I was perfect. I woke up alone as dawn painted the city in shades of pink and gold. Gabriel was gone, but his scent lingered on the sheets, pine and authority and something that was uniquely him. On the nightstand was a note written in elegant script. You are magnificent. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. G. I dressed quickly and quietly, not wanting to risk running into him. This had been a perfect night, a perfect escape, and I wanted to preserve it exactly as it was. No awkward morning conversations, no promises neither of us could keep. I slipped out of the penthouse and made it to the lobby before I heard voices behind me. Your Majesty, the car is waiting. I froze, my hand on the lobby door. Thank you, Marcus. And the flight? Ready when you are, Your Majesty. My Majesty. Not Sir. Not Alpha. Your Majesty. I turned slightly and caught a glimpse of Gabriel, my Gabriel, walking toward a black SUV surrounded by men in expensive suits. The same golden eyes, the same perfect features, but now I saw what I'd missed in the club's dim lighting. The crown tattoo on his wrist. The way even the vampires and witches had given him space. The casual way he'd commanded attention without saying a word. Gabriel Romano wasn't just an alpha. He was a king. And I just spent the night with royalty. Chapter 3. The pregnancy test trembled in my hands as I stared at the 2 pink lines that had just changed everything. Pregnant. I was pregnant with the child of a man whose real name I didn't even know. 2 months had passed since that night in the neutral territory. 2 months since I'd fled my heartbreak and found solace in the arms of a golden-eyed stranger who'd made me feel precious for one perfect night. 2 months since I'd returned to Crescent Moon Pack with my tail between my legs, broke and desperate and with nowhere else to go. Alpha Morrison had taken me back, but not out of kindness. No, he'd made it clear that my little vacation had cost me what few privileges I'd managed to earn. I was back to scrubbing floors and enduring the pack's abuse, but now with the added weight of everyone knowing I'd been publicly rejected by their golden boy. And now this. I sank onto the edge of my narrow bed in the servants' quarters, mind reeling. Gabriel, whoever he really was, had vanished from my life as completely as he'd entered it. I had no way to contact him, no last name that wasn't probably fake, nothing but memories of golden eyes and gentle hands and the way he'd made me feel like I mattered. A knock on my door made me jump, and I quickly shoved the test under my pillow. Arya. Kai's voice sent ice through my veins. Open the door. I'd been avoiding him for 2 months, but it was getting harder. Ever since that night in the garden when I'd rejected his disgusting proposal, he'd been different. Watching me. Following me. There was something dark and obsessive in his eyes now that made my skin crawl. I'm busy, I called out, hating how my voice shook. Open the door. Each word was a growl that promised consequences if I didn't comply. With shaking hands, I unlocked the door. Kai filled the doorframe, his massive bulk blocking out the hallway light. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his clothes rumpled and his gray eyes wild with something that looked dangerously close to madness. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into my tiny room. There's nothing to talk about. I backed toward the window, every instinct screaming danger. Isn't there? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You disappeared for a week after our conversation. Where did you go, Arya? That's none of your business. Everything about you is my business. He stepped closer, and I caught the scent of alcohol on his breath. Do you know what these past 2 months have been like for me? Knowing you're here, smelling your scent every day, watching other males look at you and knowing I can't claim you? You rejected me, remember? Very publicly. I rejected the mate bond, he corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I never said I didn't want you. My back hit the wall, and suddenly he was right there, caging me in with his arms. Kai, stop. I've been patient, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. I've given you time to come to your senses. But my patience is wearing thin. I told you. What you told me was said in anger. But I know you feel it too. The pull. Even without the bond, you want me. I tried to duck under his arm, but he slammed his palm against the wall beside my head. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. I lifted my chin, meeting his wild gaze. I meant every word I said that night. I would rather die than be your secret. Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or rage. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. You might not have a choice, he said quietly. The pack's patience with you is running out too. Your little disappearing act didn't win you any friends. Some of the elders are talking about exile. Fear shot through me, but I kept my expression neutral. So I could protect you. All you have to do is say yes. To being your mistress. To being mine. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I had to fight not to flinch away. I'll take care of you, Arya. Keep you safe. All I ask in return is that you warm my bed and don't ask questions about my future mate. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. And if I refuse? His smile turned cold. Then I'll make sure the elders vote for exile. You'll be cast out with nothing but the clothes on your back. No pack, no protection, no money. How long do you think you'll survive out there alone? The hand on my cheek tightened, just shy of painful. Choose wisely, Arya. This is the only offer you're going to get. Before I could answer, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts, the sound of running feet, engines rumbling in the distance. Kai's head snapped toward the window, his grip on me loosening. What the hell? The sound of engines grew louder, closer. Not just one or two vehicles, a convoy. Through my small window, I could see pack members running toward the main house, their faces tight with fear and confusion. Stay here, Kai ordered, but I was already moving toward the door. I followed the crowd to the front of the pack house, where Alpha Morrison stood on the steps looking pale and shaken. Before him stretched a line of black SUVs that looked like they belonged to the government or the military. The vehicles were pristine, expensive, and somehow managed to radiate power even while stationary. Pack members whispered nervously, pressing closer together. Whoever was in those cars, they weren't here for a social visit. The rear door of the center vehicle opened, and my world tilted on its axis. Gabriel stepped out. No, not Gabriel. The man climbing gracefully from the SUV wore the same face, had the same golden eyes, the same predatory grace. But this version was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Power radiated from him like heat from a bonfire, and when his gaze swept over the assembled pack, grown wolves instinctively lowered their heads. This wasn't the charming stranger who'd bought me drinks and made me feel beautiful. This was a king, and every line of his body proclaimed it. Our eyes met across the courtyard, and recognition flared between us. His nostrils flared slightly, and I saw the exact moment he caught my scent. Those golden eyes darkened with something that looked like hunger and possession and relief all rolled into one. Alpha Morrison, he said, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard. Even speaking normally, he commanded absolute attention. I am King Lucian Nightfall. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The Leakin King. The ruler of all North American werewolf packs. The most powerful supernatural being on the continent. And I'd slept with him. Alpha Morrison dropped to one knee so fast it was almost comical. Around the courtyard, every pack member followed suit until I was the only one left standing. My legs felt like water, but somehow I remained upright, staring at the man who'd held me so gently just 2 months ago. Your Majesty, Morrison stammered. We are honored by your presence. How can Crescent Moon Pack serve you? King Lucian, because apparently Gabriel Romano had been as fake as everything else about that night, smiled. It was the same devastating expression that had made my heart skip in the club, but now it carried the weight of absolute authority. I haven't come for your service, Alpha Morrison, he said, his gaze never leaving mine. I've come for my mate. The words hit the pack like a physical blow. Gasps and whispers erupted around the courtyard as heads turned to follow the king's gaze. When they realized he was looking at me, the whispers became a roar. Impossible, someone breathed. The wolfless freak? It has to be a mistake. But Lucian was already moving, crossing the courtyard with that predatory grace while his security detail flanked him. The crowd parted before him like the Red Sea, and suddenly he was standing right in front of me. "Hello, Arya," he said softly, and despite everything, the lies, the deception, the sheer impossibility of the situation, my treacherous heart skipped at the sound of my name on his lips. "Your Majesty," I managed, proud that my voice only shook a little. His smile widened. "Still formal, even now?" He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture intimate and possessive. "I told you that night, we're not strangers." Around us, the pack watched in stunned silence. I could feel their shock, their disbelief, their growing excitement at the thought that their rejected Omega was somehow connected to the most powerful wolf in North America. All except for Kai, whose rage was so palpable I could practically taste it. "This is impossible," he snarled, stepping forward despite the very real danger of challenging a Leakin king. "She's wolfless. She's nobody. She can't be your mate." Lucian's head turned toward Kai with the slow precision of a predator focusing on prey. The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop 10 degrees. "And you are?" His voice was pleasant, conversational. "Deadly. Kai Thornfield, future alpha of this pack and the fool who rejected her." Lucian's golden eyes flashed with something that made every survival instinct I had scream warnings. "Yes, I've heard about you." Kai's face went white, then red. "You don't understand. She's defective. Broken. She's not worthy of." He never finished the sentence. One moment he was standing 3 feet away, the next he was on his back in the dirt with Lucian's hand around his throat. The king hadn't seemed to move, but suddenly Kai was gasping for air while golden eyes promised a very painful death. "Choose your next words very carefully," Lucian said, his voice still pleasant despite the violence of his actions. "Because they may be your last." "Your Majesty." Alpha Morrison scrambled forward, clearly terrified. "Please," he meant no disrespect. "He's young, foolish. He insulted my mate." Lucian's grip tightened, and Kai's face started turning purple. "In my presence. The penalty for that is death." "Please," I said, the word falling from my lips before I could stop it. "Don't." Lucian's head turned toward me, and I saw surprise flicker across his features. "You defend him? After what he did to you?" "I don't want his death on my conscience." For a long moment, we stared at each other. Then, slowly, Lucian released his grip. Kai collapsed to the ground, gasping and clutching his throat. "You live because she has a merciful heart," Lucian told him. "Pray you never test her patience again." He turned back to me, and his expression softened. "We need to talk. Privately." Before I could respond, a frail voice spoke from the crowd. "No." Every head turned toward the sound. Elder Meredith stepped forward, her ancient frame shaking but her voice steady. She had to be pushing 90, one of the oldest wolves in the pack, and I'd barely spoken to her in all my years here. "Elder?" Alpha Morrison looked confused. I said no. Meredith's roomy eyes fixed on Lucian with an expression that bordered on hatred. "That girl goes nowhere with him." Lucian's eyebrows rose. "And why is that, old woman?" "Because 22 years ago, you sent rogues to attack this pack. You ordered the death of Jerome and Sarah Blackwood." Her gnarled finger pointed directly at me. "Her parents died because of you." The world stopped. Everything went silent except for the roaring in my ears. My parents. The attack that had killed them. The stranger they'd died saving. I looked at Lucian, really looked at him, and saw the truth written in his golden eyes. No denial. No surprise. Just a flash of something that might have been regret. "Arya," he said quietly. "You." The word came out as a whisper. "You killed them." "It's not that simple. You killed my parents." The words were getting louder, fueled by a rage that was building in my chest like a wildfire. "They died saving someone from rogues that you sent. They died because of you." And then the most impossible thing of all happened. Deep inside me, something stirred. Something wild and angry and powerful that I'd never felt before. Something that felt suspiciously like a wolf waking up for the first time. Right as I learned I was carrying the child of the man who destroyed my family. The world started to spin, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision. The last thing I heard before I hit the ground was Lucian shouting my name, his voice raw with something that sounded almost like pain. Then darkness claimed me, and I knew nothing more. Chapter 4. I woke up to the scent of pine and authority, and for one blissful moment, I forgot everything that had happened. Then reality crashed back like a tidal wave. Lucian. The Leakin King. My parents' killer. The father of my unborn child. I bolted upright, immediately regretting the movement as my head spun. I was lying on a couch in Alpha Morrison's office, and Lucian sat in a chair beside me, his golden eyes dark with concern. The moment I was conscious, relief flooded his features. "Thank the goddess," he murmured, reaching toward me. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the arm of the couch. "Don't touch me." Pain flashed across his face. "Arya, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" The words came out as a snarl. "How you sent rogues to murder innocent people. How my parents died because of your orders. That's not what happened." His voice was low, urgent. "I would never." Elder Meredith said. "Elder Meredith is mistaken." He leaned forward, and I caught that familiar scent that my treacherous body still responded to. "Arya, you have to listen to me." I felt it that night in the club. The mate bond. It was there, real and strong and... Stop. I pressed my hands over my ears. Just stop. But he kept talking, his voice cutting through my defenses like a blade. "I've been searching for you for 2 months. Do you have any idea what it's been like, knowing you were out there, not being able to find you? When I finally traced you here, I thought you'd be happy to see me." Happy. He thought I'd be happy to discover that the man I'd given myself to was the monster who destroyed my family. "You lied to me," I whispered. "Gabriel Romano." Was any of it real? Something flickered in his eyes. "My feelings for you were real. Everything I said that night was real. Except your name. Except who you are. Except the fact that you're a murderer." "I am not a murderer." The words came out as a growl, and for a moment, I saw the dangerous predator beneath the civilized exterior. "I have never ordered attacks on innocent packs. Someone is lying to you, and when I find out who..." The office door burst open, cutting him off. Alpha Morrison stumbled in, his face pale and panicked. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but the pack elders request an immediate audience. They're very concerned about the situation." Lucian's jaw clenched. "What situation?" "Well, sir." Morrison glanced nervously between us. "The pack is aware that you've claimed Arya as your mate, but given her status, they're not sure how to proceed." "Her status?" "She's wolfless, Your Majesty. And there was the very public rejection by our future alpha. The pack is confused about protocol." I watched Lucian's face transform, watched the mask of civility slip away to reveal something ancient and terrifying. Power rolled off him in waves, and Alpha Morrison actually whimpered. "Protocol," Lucian repeated, his voice deadly quiet. "Let me clarify the protocol for you, Alpha Morrison. She is my mate. My queen. Anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with me personally." The threat was unmistakable, and Morrison's knees actually buckled. "Of course, Your Majesty. Of course." But perhaps it would be best if you spoke to the elders directly? They're waiting in the council chamber. Lucian looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Morrison's expression must have convinced him. He stood, his movements predatory and fluid. "Stay here," he told me. "Don't move. We're not finished talking." The moment the door closed behind them, I was on my feet. My head still felt like cotton, but adrenaline was clearing the fog fast. I had maybe 10 minutes before they realized I was gone. 10 minutes to disappear before the Leaken King decided to drag me back to his kingdom as his unwilling queen. I slipped out of the office and down the hallway, keeping to the shadows. Years of avoiding pack bullies had taught me how to move unseen through the pack house. I made it to my room without being spotted and quickly grabbed the emergency bag I'd kept packed since I was 15, old habits from a childhood spent hiding from abuse. Cash, a change of clothes, basic supplies. Everything I needed to disappear. But as I turned to leave, voices in the hallway made me freeze. "Dangerous game we're playing," someone was saying. It sounded like Elder Thomas. "The girl knows nothing," another voice replied. "Elder Marcus. And now that the king has claimed her, our secret is safe." Is it? What if she starts asking questions? What if she pieces things together? My blood turned to ice. They were talking about me. "She won't," Marcus said with conviction. Meredith played her part perfectly. The girl believes the king killed her parents. She'll never suspect the truth. But what if the king investigates? What if he discovers we were paid to? "Lower your voice, you fool. And have faith. We've covered our tracks well. The king will never know about the gold the Real killers paid us to frame him." I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. Paid to lie? Frame him? What were they talking about? "Still," Thomas continued, "I don't like it. That girl's always been trouble. First her parents poking around where they shouldn't, and now this. Maybe we should have let Kai handle her his way. Kai's way would have drawn too much attention. This is better. Let the king take her away. Let her live the rest of her life believing he murdered her family. It's a poetic justice, really." Their voices were fading as they moved down the hall, and I caught only fragments of what came next. "Real killers paid us well. Never suspect the Nightshade Pack. Parents were getting too close to the truth about." Then they were gone, leaving me reeling in the darkness. Lies. It had all been lies. The elders had been paid to frame Lucian for my parents' deaths. But by whom? And why? What truth had my parents been getting close to? Heavy footsteps in the corridor snapped me back to reality. I had to move. Questions could wait, survival came first. I slipped out the back door and into the woods, following paths I'd memorized during years of hiding from pack bullies. The moon was high overhead, providing just enough light to navigate by. I had maybe 20 minutes before they discovered I was missing. The plan I'd been forming crystallized as I ran. If I was going to disappear, it had to be permanent. No half measures. The Leaken King had resources I couldn't imagine. He'd never stop hunting for me unless he believed I was dead. So that's what I'd give him. A death. The old Celtic waterfall was a 15-minute run through the forest. Local legend claimed it was cursed, that wolves who fell from the cliff above were never seen again. Their bodies, supposedly, were swept away by underground currents that fed into a vast cave system. Perfect for staging a death. I'd learned about the caves from my father before he died. He'd been fascinated by the pack's history, had spent hours exploring the old tunnels that honeycombed the territory. Some were natural, others had been carved by wolves fleeing persecution centuries ago. Most pack members had forgotten they existed, but I remembered every story, every map my father had sketched. The caves connected to an exit nearly 30 miles away. If I could reach them, I could disappear completely. But first, I needed to die. The wolf's bane grew wild near the waterfall, a fact that had always seemed grimly appropriate given the legends. I gathered as much as I could carry, crushing the leaves and stems to release their potent scent-masking properties. The stuff was poison to werewolves, deadly in large quantities, but in small doses it could hide a scent completely. I rubbed the crushed plants all over my clothes and skin, gagging at the bitter smell. Any wolf tracking me would lose my scent at the waterfall's edge. Next, I needed blood. Lots of it. The old hunting cabin sat about half a mile from the falls, abandoned for years but still occasionally used by pack hunters. I broke in through a window, cutting my hand in the process. Good, more blood for the scene. In the cabin's ancient refrigerator, I found what I was looking for, a package of pig's blood that some hunter had been saving for bait. It was partially frozen but would work perfectly. I carried everything to the cliff above the waterfall, my heart pounding so hard I was sure anyone within a mile could hear it. The drop was maybe 40 feet into a pool that looked black in the moonlight. Dangerous, but not necessarily fatal if you knew how to fall. I did. I jumped from these cliffs before, years ago, when the pain of pack life had driven me to seek any kind of escape. I knew exactly where the deep water was, knew how the currents worked. But no one else did. Working quickly, I spread pig's blood across the rocks at the cliff's edge, making it look like someone had been injured, or killed, before going over. I tore my shirt and left pieces of fabric clinging to the rocks, added more blood to the path leading to the edge. Finally, I covered myself in wolf's bane oil I'd made by crushing the plants with stream water. The smell was overwhelming, nauseating, but it would hide my scent completely. Then I jumped. The fall seemed to last forever. Cold air rushed past my face, and for a terrifying moment, I wondered if I'd miscalculated. Then I hit the water, the impact driving all the air from my lungs. The pool was deeper than I'd remembered, and colder. Much colder. I fought my way to the surface, gasping and choking, then swam toward the hidden cave entrance my father had shown me years ago. It was barely visible, a crack in the rock face that was only accessible when the water level was exactly right. I'd have to dive to reach it, and pray I could hold my breath long enough to make it through the underwater passage to the air pocket beyond. I dove. The passage was longer than I remembered, narrower. My lungs burned as I felt my way through absolute darkness, following the cave wall with desperate fingers. Just when I thought I'd made a fatal mistake, my head broke the surface in a small air pocket. I floated there for several minutes, gasping and shivering, before swimming toward the tunnel that would lead me to freedom. Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of voices echoing off the water. They'd found my death scene. Blood everywhere, someone was saying. Looks like she fell. Or jumped. That was Kai's voice, hard and bitter. Good riddance. The king's not going to like this, Alpha Morrison said nervously. We need to search for a body. The legends say no one who falls here is ever found, Elder Thomas replied. The underground currents, she's gone. Their voices faded as I swam deeper into the cave system, following passages my father had mapped years ago. The water was freezing, and my muscles cramped with cold and exhaustion, but I kept going. I had to keep going. Because behind me lay everything I'd ever known, and ahead lay an uncertain future with a child whose father might not be the monster I'd believed him to be. The elders had been paid to lie. But by whom? And why? I didn't know, but I was going to find out. Even if it killed me. Chapter 5. Mama, the flowers are singing again. I looked up from grinding willow bark to find my 3-year-old daughter, Ember, standing in the doorway of my clinic with dirt-stained hands and leaves in her auburn hair. Her green eyes, so much like my own, sparkled with the same otherworldly awareness that had been manifesting more frequently over the past few months. Are they now? I kept my voice light, but inside, worry gnawed at me. Ember's abilities were growing stronger every day, and in a small mountain community like Cedar Falls, standing out was dangerous. They're happy, she continued, skipping into the room. They like the new medicine you're making. She was right, of course. The willow bark would help old Mrs. Chen's arthritis, and somehow my precocious daughter knew it. Ember had been demonstrating an uncanny ability to sense the healing properties of plants since she could barely walk. It was a gift that would have been celebrated in some packs, but here in our carefully constructed life as humans, it was just another secret to keep. "Where's your brother?" I asked, setting down my mortar and pestle. "Asher's napping on the porch swing. The sunlight makes his eyes look like gold coins." My heart clenched. Asher had inherited his father's distinctive golden eyes, and while they were beautiful, they were also unmistakably supernatural. I'd been passing them off as a rare genetic trait, but as he got older, the questions were getting harder to deflect. Both of my children were living proof of the night 3 years ago when I'd given my heart to a stranger who turned out to be the Leakin King. The night that had changed everything. "Luna?" Mrs. Patterson's voice called from the front of the clinic. "Are you available?" My grandson took a tumble from his bike. I smoothed my hands over my simple blue dress and went to greet my patient. Luna Sterling, that was who I was now. Not Arya Blackwood, the wolfless reject who'd fled her pack in desperation. Luna was confident, competent, respected. She ran the only medical clinic for 50 miles, delivered babies, set bones, and had somehow managed to convince an entire human community that she was just a gifted healer with unusual intuition. It had taken 2 years to build this life, 2 years of careful planning and even more careful lying. But I'd done it. My children were safe, fed, loved. We had a home, a community that needed us, a future that belonged to us alone. Most days, I almost believed we were safe. The afternoon passed in its usual rhythm, a sprained ankle, a case of bronchitis, a woman seeking herbs for morning sickness. I loved this work, loved the feeling of being useful, needed. It was so different from the life I'd known at Crescent Moon Pack, where I'd been seen as a burden at best. As evening approached, I was cleaning my instruments when a commotion outside made me look up. Through the window, I could see several townspeople gathered around something near the tree line. Their voices carried urgency, fear. I grabbed my medical bag and rushed outside, leaving Ember and Asher with Mrs. Patterson. What I found made my blood run cold. A man lay unconscious at the forest's edge, his body broken and bloody. Even from a distance, I could tell his injuries were severe, and definitely not the result of any normal accident. Claw marks shredded his clothes, and the scent of wolf blood hung heavy in the air. My carefully constructed human facade demanded that I see only an injured hiker. But my supernatural senses told a different story entirely. This man was a werewolf, and a powerful one. "Someone get him inside," I ordered, falling back on my role as the local healer. Carefully, his spine might be injured. We got him into the clinic and onto my examination table. The townspeople dispersed once I assured them I could handle it, leaving me alone with a patient who could destroy everything I'd built. Up close, his injuries were even worse than I'd thought. Deep lacerations covered his torso, several ribs were broken, and there was significant blood loss. But it was the scent of him that made my hands shake as I worked. Pine and leather and something wild. Pack scent, but not one I recognized. Definitely not from Crescent Moon. I cleaned and stitched wounds with practiced efficiency, drawing on skills I'd learned from the pack's old healer before she died. Werewolf healing was faster than human, but these injuries would still take days to mend properly. As I worked, I studied his face. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and strong features that would be handsome once they weren't covered in blood and bruises. There was something familiar about him, though I couldn't place it. It wasn't until I was bandaging his chest that he stirred. His eyes opened slowly, revealing irises of deep brown flecked with gold. When they focused on my face, I saw recognition flicker through them. My blood turned to ice. "Easy," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. "You've been badly injured. Don't try to move." He blinked slowly, his gaze never leaving my face. When he spoke, his voice was rough with pain and something else. "You're the healer?" "I am. What's your name?" A pause. "Derek," he said finally. "Derek Kane." Liar. The name rolled off his tongue too easily, too practiced. But I wasn't exactly in a position to call him on it. "Well, Derek, you're lucky to be alive. What happened to you? Hiking accident, he said, echoing my own lie back to me. Must have fallen down a ravine. We stared at each other, both of us maintaining our facades while supernatural tension crackled between us. He knew what I was, and I knew what he was. The question was what we were going to do about it. I need to keep you here for observation, I said finally. Head trauma can be tricky. He nodded slowly. I appreciate your discretion. The word hung between us, loaded with meaning. Over the next 3 days, I monitored his recovery while he maintained his human act for the benefit of any townspeople who stopped by to check on him. But when we were alone, the pretense dropped slightly. Your children, he said on the second day, watching through the window as Ember chased butterflies in the garden. They're beautiful. Ice shot through my veins. What about them? Nothing, he said quickly. Just, they seem special. All children are special. Of course. But his eyes lingered on Asher, who was napping in a patch of sunlight, his golden eyes catching the light even through closed lids. On the third night, I was changing his bandages when he finally broke. I know who you are, he said quietly. My hands stilled. I'm Luna Sterling. You're Arya Blackwood. And those children, they're the Leakin Kings. I could have denied it. Should have denied it. Instead, I found myself asking, what do you want? Nothing. The answer surprised me. I want nothing from you. Everyone wants something. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with something that sounded like regret. 3 years ago, a woman died at Celtic Falls. Jumped, they said, rather than face her fate. The Leakin King searched for weeks, convinced she was alive. When he finally accepted her death, it nearly destroyed him. I don't know what you're talking about. The king is my alpha, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. Has been for 7 years. I've seen him in battle, seen him negotiate treaties, seen him pass judgment on criminals. But I'd never seen him break until the day they told him his mate was dead. Something twisted in my chest. Stop. He's not what you think he is, Marcus said, his brown eyes intense. The night you met him, he'd been visiting Pax on a diplomatic mission. Building alliances, strengthening bonds. He doesn't send rogues to attack innocent wolves, Arya. He protects them. The elders said. The elders lied. His voice was flat, certain. I know because I've spent the last 3 years investigating your parents' deaths. The room seemed to tilt. What? The king ordered the investigation after you, after the incident at the falls. He couldn't understand why you believed he was responsible, so he had me dig deeper. Marcus struggled to sit up, wincing as his ribs protested. What I found will shock you. I don't want to hear this. Your father wasn't just a pack warrior, Arya. He was Alpha Morrison's older brother. The rightful heir to Crescent Moon Pack. The words hit me like physical blows. That's impossible. Morrison usurped the position when your father chose exile rather than challenge him directly. Your father didn't want to split the pack, didn't want civil war. So he stepped aside, took a lower rank, started a family. My legs gave out, and I sank into the chair beside his bed. You're lying. Your father spent his final years investigating illegal territory deals. Someone was selling pack lands to developers, making millions while displacing wolf families. He was getting close to the truth when the rogues attacked. Who? The word came out as a whisper. Alpha Marcus of Crescent Moon. Morrison's enforcer and cousin. He orchestrated the whole thing, hired rogues to kill your parents, paid the elders to blame the Leakin King, and eliminated the only threat to their operation. The room spun around me. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd believed for 3 years, was crumbling. Why should I believe you? Derek reached into his jacket pocket with painful slowness and pulled out a thick folder. Because I have proof. Financial records, witness statements, communication logs. Everything. I stared at the folder like it might bite me. Why? Why are you telling me this? Because the king deserves to know his mate and children are alive. Because you deserve to know the truth about your parents. And because Alpha Marcus is still out there, still stealing from packs, still destroying families. He doesn't know I'm alive? No one does except me. The king believes you're dead. He's not the same man you knew in that club. Grief changed him. Through the window, I could see Ember playing with dandelions, making them dance in the air with unconscious magic. Asher sat nearby, his golden eyes solemn as he watched his sister's display of power. My children. Lucian's children. The Leakin King's heirs, hidden away in a mountain town while their father grieved a mate he thought was dead. What happens now? I asked. Derek's eyes were kind but firm. That's up to you. But they deserve to know their father. And he deserves to know they exist. I thought about the life I'd built here, the safety I'd created for my children. Then I thought about the man with golden eyes who'd made me feel precious for one perfect night, who'd been grieving my death for 3 years while I hid in the shadows. The man who wasn't my parents' killer after all. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and I wondered if the storm was just beginning. Chapter 6. The whiskey burned as it went down, but King Lucian Nightfall barely noticed. Pain had become his constant companion over the past 3 years, and alcohol was just another failed attempt to dull its edges. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his private study, staring out at the sprawling grounds of the royal estate without really seeing them. Reports covered his massive oak desk, territorial disputes, trade agreements, marriage proposals from ambitious alphas seeking to unite their daughters with the grieving Leakin King. All of it felt like moving through water, distant and meaningless. Everything had felt meaningless since Arya died. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. Enter, he commanded, not bothering to turn around. Your Majesty. Derek Kane's voice was carefully neutral, but Lucian caught the underlying tension immediately. 3 years of grief had sharpened his already formidable instincts. Where once he'd been strategic but fair, now he was ruthless. Where once he'd been respected, now he was feared. His own council members flinched when he entered a room, and enemy packs whispered that the Leakin King had finally become the monster they'd always claimed he was. They weren't entirely wrong. Report, Lucian said, still facing the window. I've returned from the investigation you ordered. The one into the Blackwood deaths. Lucian's entire body went rigid. He'd sent Derek to investigate Arya's parents' murders 6 months ago, one last desperate attempt to understand why his mate had believed he was responsible for destroying her family. And? Your Majesty. Marcus's voice was strained. You need to sit down. I'll stand. Talk. The investigation revealed that Alpha Marcus of Crescent Moon Pack orchestrated the attack. He hired the rogues, paid the elders to frame you, eliminated anyone who might expose his embezzlement operation. Lucian finally turned, his golden eyes blazing with fury. Embezzlement? Alpha Morrison's enforcer has been selling pack territories to human developers for 3 years. Arya's father discovered the operation and was gathering evidence when he was killed. The crystal tumbler in Lucian's hand exploded, whiskey and glass shards falling to the carpet. You're certain? I have financial records, witness statements, recorded conversations. Marcus even bragged about it to his inner circle, how he'd fooled the mighty Leakin King into believing his mate was a traitor's daughter. Rage poured through Lucian's veins like lava. For 3 years, he'd carried the guilt of Arya's hatred, the agony of knowing she'd died believing he was her family's killer. And all of it had been lies. There's more, Your Majesty. More? The word came out as a growl. Marcus swallowed hard. Arya Blackwood isn't dead. The world stopped. Lucian's enhanced hearing caught the sound of his own heartbeat, thundering so loud it drowned out everything else. What did you say? She's alive. Living under the name Luna Sterling in a remote mountain community. She saved my life when I was injured during the investigation. Alive. His mate was alive. 3 years of grief, 3 years of believing she was dead, 3 years of his soul slowly dying inside his chest, and she was alive. Where? The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Cedar Falls, about 4 hours north. But Your Majesty, there's something else you need to know. Prepare the convoy. Lucian was already moving toward the door, every predatory instinct in his body screaming to find her, claim her, never let her go again. Sir, please. There's something else. It can wait. Nothing else mattered. Nothing except getting to Arya before she disappeared again. But Derek stepped into his path, something he never would have dared 3 years ago. Death gleamed in Lucian's eyes, but the warrior stood his ground. She has children, Your Majesty. Twins. 3 years old. The words hit Lucian like a physical blow. Children. 3 years old. The night in the club had been exactly 3 years and 9 months ago. Are they? He couldn't finish the question. The boy has your eyes, sir. Golden, exactly like yours. Lucian's knees nearly buckled. Children. His children. He was a father, and he'd never known. Why didn't she tell me? The words came out broken, raw. Because she believes you killed her parents. She's been hiding from you for 3 years, terrified you'd find her. The rage that filled Lucian then was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Not just anger at the deception, but fury at the years stolen from him. Years with his mate, with his children. Years of believing the woman he loved was dead while she raised their babies alone, afraid. Ready the convoy, he said again, his voice deadly calm. And bring everything we have on Alpha Marcus. Every piece of evidence. Your Majesty, perhaps we should approach this carefully. She's been hiding for 3 years. If you arrive as the king, with full regalia and security, you'll terrify her. Good. The word was Arctic. She should be terrified. She should understand exactly what it means to keep my children from me. Derek looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Lucian's expression stopped him. Yes, Your Majesty. The convoy that arrived in Cedar Falls 2 days later was designed to intimidate. 12 black SUVs with bulletproof glass and royal insignia, flanked by motorcycle escorts. When they pulled up outside the small medical clinic, every person in the tiny mountain town came out to stare. Lucian emerged from the center vehicle like an apex predator stepping into sunlight. Gone was any trace of the charming stranger who'd bought Arya drinks in a neutral territory club. This was the Leakin King in all his terrifying glory, custom-tailored black suit, titanium watch that cost more than most people's homes, and an aura of barely contained violence that made every supernatural sense in a 50-mile radius scream warnings. His golden eyes swept the town with predatory precision before locking onto the clinic's front door. She was in there. His mate. The mother of his children. The woman who'd let him believe she was dead for 3 years. He could smell her now, that intoxicating scent of wildflowers and strength that had haunted his dreams. But underneath it was something new. Fear. She knew he was here. The clinic's front door opened, and Arya stepped out. 3 years had changed her. She was still beautiful, more beautiful, if possible, but there was a confidence in her bearing that hadn't been there before. Her dark hair was longer, pulled back in a practical braid, and she wore simple clothes that spoke of a life lived quietly. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Green as summer forests, they held a wariness that cut him to the bone. She was looking at him like he was a predator come to destroy everything she'd built. Maybe he was. Your Majesty. Her voice was steady, but he caught the underlying tremor. Arya. He savored her real name, let it roll off his tongue like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. I go by Luna now. No. The word was absolute. You are Arya Blackwood. You are my mate. You are the mother of my children. He saw her flinch at the last words, saw fear flicker across her features. Around them, his security detail maintained their positions while the townspeople watched from safe distances. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but the lie sat poorly on her lips. Don't. The command was soft but carried the weight of absolute authority. Don't lie to me. Not about this. She glanced back toward the clinic, and he caught movement in the window. Small faces, curious and innocent, peering out at the commotion. His children. Where are they? He asked, his voice rougher than he intended. I don't. Arya. Her name was a warning. I can smell them. I can sense them. Bring them out. No. The word exploded from her lips with surprising force. I won't let you hurt them. Hurt them? The accusation hit him like a slap. You think I would harm my own children? I think you're capable of anything. Her chin lifted, and for a moment, he saw a flash of the fierce woman who'd kneed him in the groin 3 years ago. You had my parents killed. No. He stepped closer, and she stepped back. I didn't. The elders said. The elders lied. He pulled out the thick folder Marcus had given him, holding it toward her. Everything you were told about your parents' deaths was a fabrication. Alpha Marcus of your birth pack orchestrated the entire thing. She stared at the folder like it might explode. I don't believe you. Your father wasn't just a pack warrior, Arya. He was Alpha Morrison's older brother, the rightful heir to Crescent Moon Pack. He discovered that Marcus was embezzling pack funds, selling protected territories to human developers. Stop. When your father got too close to the truth, Marcus hired rogues to eliminate him. Your mother died trying to protect him. Then Marcus paid the pack elders to frame me for the attack, knowing it would discredit any future investigation. Stop. The word came out as a scream that echoed off the surrounding mountains. The clinic door burst open, and 2 small figures tumbled out, a girl with Arya's dark hair and green eyes, and a boy whose golden gaze was like looking into a mirror. Lucian's heart stopped. They were perfect. Absolutely perfect. The girl, his daughter, had Arya's fierce spirit written in every line of her small face. The boy, his son, studied him with an intensity that was purely nightfall. Mama? The girl's voice was sweet and concerned. Why is everyone yelling? Arya immediately moved to position herself between Lucian and the children, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. Go back inside, babies. But the boy, Asher, Marcus had said his name was Asher, stepped forward instead. Those golden eyes, so like Lucian's own, studied him with uncomfortable perception. You're the one from Mama's pictures, he said solemnly. Pictures? Lucian's gaze snapped to Arya, who had gone pale. The ones she hides in her jewelry box, the girl, Ember, added helpfully. She looks at them when she thinks we're sleeping. Ember, hush, Arya whispered, but it was too late. Lucian's world tilted on its axis. She'd kept pictures of him. For 3 years, she'd been looking at pictures of him while he grieved her death. Why? The word came out broken. Why did you let me believe you were dead? Tears gathered in her eyes, but her stance remained protective. Because I thought you were a monster. And now? She looked at the folder in his hands, at the evidence of her parents' true killer, and something cracked in her expression. Now I don't know what to think. Asher moved closer to Lucian, those golden eyes studying him with 3-year-old curiosity. Are you my daddy? The simple question nearly brought the Leaken King to his knees. Yes, he whispered, crouching down to the boy's level. I am. Mama said daddies protect their families, Asher continued with devastating innocence. Where have you been? Looking for you, Lucian said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been looking for you every day for 3 years. He looked up at Arya, saw the tears streaming down her face, saw the moment when her careful walls finally began to crack. Read the file, he said softly. Learn the truth about what really happened to your parents. And then decide what happens next. Around them, the town watched in stunned silence as the most powerful supernatural being in North America knelt in the dirt before 2 toddlers who held his entire world in their small hands. Chapter 7. The file lay open on my kitchen table like a bomb that had already detonated, destroying everything I thought I knew about my life. Financial records. Bank transfers. Recorded conversations. Witness statements. Page after page of evidence that painted a picture so clear, so damning, that I couldn't deny it any longer. Alpha Marcus had killed my parents. Not Lucian. Not the Leakin King who sat across from me now, his golden eyes heavy with 3 years of grief I'd caused. Marcus, the man who'd called my father brother, who'd stood at their funeral and offered me comfort, who'd watched me suffer in exile while knowing he was the one who'd destroyed my family. "I'm going to be sick," I whispered, pushing the papers away. "Arya. Don't." I held up a hand, stopping Lucian mid-sentence. "Just, give me a minute." Through the kitchen window, I could see Ember and Asher playing in the garden under the watchful eyes of 2 of Lucian's guards. My children, our children, laughing and innocent while their world crumbled around them. 3 years. 3 years I'd kept them from their father because I'd believed a lie. 3 years Lucian had grieved a mate he thought was dead while I raised his children alone. 3 years of running, hiding, building a life based on deception. How do I even begin to apologize for this? I asked, my voice breaking. "You don't." Lucian's voice was soft, but when I looked up, his eyes were fierce. "You were protecting our children the only way you knew how. You believed your parents' killers were telling the truth. I should have questioned it. Should have investigated. You were 22 years old, grieving, and surrounded by people you trusted who were lying to you." He leaned forward, his hand hovering over mine on the table but not quite touching. "The blame lies with Marcus, not you." Tears blurred my vision. "You spent 3 years thinking I was dead. And you spent 3 years thinking I was a monster." His fingers finally brushed mine, the contact sending electricity up my arm. "We've both lost time we can't get back. The question is what we do now." Before I could answer, a new scent hit my nostrils. Wolf. Multiple wolves. And something else, something that made every survival instinct I had scream warnings. Lucian was on his feet instantly, his body coiled for violence. "Get the children. Now." Through the window, I saw his guards moving toward the house, their faces grim. Whatever was coming, they detected it too. "Mama?" Ember's voice called from the garden, high and frightened. I bolted for the door, but Lucian caught my arm. "Stay behind me." We stepped outside together, and my blood turned to ice. A line of black SUVs, different from Lucian's convoy, had surrounded my property. The vehicles disgorged men in tactical gear, their weapons trained on us. And stepping out of the lead vehicle was Alpha Marcus himself. He looked exactly as I remembered, silver-haired, distinguished, with the kind of face that inspired trust. The face of a man who'd murdered my parents and let me believe I was to blame. Behind him came another familiar figure that made my heart stutter with old fear. Kai Thornfield emerged from the second vehicle, his gray eyes burning with 3 years of obsession and rage. Well, Marcus called out, his voice carrying easily across the yard. "The dead have risen indeed." Lucian moved in front of me, power radiating from him like heat. "Marcus. You're trespassing on sovereign territory." "Am I?" Marcus smiled, and it was a predator's expression. "I don't see any territorial markers. This looks like unclaimed land to me. Everything within a 50-mile radius is under my protection." "Your protection?" Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "The great Leakin King, reduced to hiding in the mountains with a wolfless reject and her bastard children." Lucian's growl was so low, so dangerous, that several of Marcus's men actually stepped back. "Choose your next words very carefully." "Oh, I choose them perfectly." Marcus's eyes found mine over Lucian's shoulder. "Hello, Arya. You've led us quite a chase. What do you want?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "What's mine, of course." He gestured to the tactical team surrounding us. 23 years ago, your father stole something from my family. Something precious. I've come to reclaim it." My father never stole anything. Didn't he? Marcus's smile turned cruel. Tell me, child, what do you know about your mother's bloodline? Something cold slithered down my spine. What are you talking about? Sarah Moon whisper, Marcus continued, savoring each word. Daughter of the Moon River Pack's royal family. The last heir to a throne my grandfather should have inherited. The world tilted around me. You're lying. Am I? Why do you think your parents were really exiled from their packs? Why do you think they lived in hiding? Your mother was the last surviving member of a bloodline that stood between my family and absolute power. Lucian's head turned slightly toward me, his expression stunned. Royal bloodline? Oh yes, Marcus said with satisfaction. Little Arya isn't just a wolfless reject. She's the rightful queen of the Moon River territories. Or she would be, if she could shift. Which is why you killed them, I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. You didn't just want to cover up embezzlement. You wanted to eliminate the royal line. I wanted to finish what my grandfather started. But your parents fled before we could complete the job. Took you with them, hid you away in that pathetic pack. His eyes glittered with old hatred. I spent years tracking you down, only to discover the perfect irony, the last royal heir, born wolfless and powerless. So why not just let her live in exile? Lucian demanded, his body coiled for violence. Because of them. Marcus nodded toward Ember and Asher, who were huddled behind one of Lucian's guards. Royal blood breeds true, even diluted with yours. Those children will be powerful beyond imagining when they come of age. I can't allow that. Ice shot through my veins. You want my children. I want what should have been mine from the beginning. The Moon River territories, the royal bloodline, the power that comes with both. He smiled, and it was the expression of a man who'd already won. Kill the king, take the children, and finally claim my birthright through marriage to their mother. You're insane, I breathed. I'm practical. He raised his hand, and his men shifted their weapons from defensive positions to attack stances. The Leakin king dies here, in an unfortunate accident during a custody dispute. The children disappear, along with their mother. And in a few years, when they're old enough, they'll help me reclaim everything my family lost. Over my dead body, Lucian snarled. If necessary. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Marcus dropped his hand, and chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded around us as Marcus's tactical team opened fire. Lucian's guards responded instantly, shifting into their wolf forms as they engaged the attackers. The air filled with gunpowder, blood, and the sounds of battle. I dove toward my children, scooping them up and carrying them toward the house. But Kai was there, blocking my path, his face twisted with 3 years of obsession. Did you really think you could hide from me forever? He snarled, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. Let go of me. Not this time. His grip tightened. You're coming with us, Arya. You and those brats. They're not brats, I said, fury building in my chest. They're children. They're weapons, he corrected. And they're going to help us rule the supernatural world. Something snapped inside me then. Not just anger, but something deeper. Something primal that had been sleeping for 25 years finally stirred to life. No, I said, and power I'd never felt before began building in my chest. They're not. Kai's eyes widened as he sensed the change in me. What? Pain exploded through my body as bones began to reshape, muscles stretched and reformed. I'd waited my entire life for this moment, and it was happening now, in the middle of a battle, with my children's lives hanging in the balance. My first shift. Light poured from my skin as my wolf finally emerged, not the brown or gray or black of common wolves, but pure white that seemed to glow with its own internal fire. When my transformation completed, I stood on 4 legs for the first time in my life, power thrumming through every cell of my body. Kai stumbled backward, his face pale with shock. Impossible. Through my new senses, I could smell his fear, could see the silver gleam of my own eyes reflected in his wide gaze. Around us, the battle had stopped as every supernatural being in the area turned to stare at the white wolf with silver eyes that legend said appeared only once in a generation. Marcus's voice cut through the stunned silence, thick with greed and triumph. The Moon Whisper bloodline awakens at last. Even better than I hoped. I shifted back to human form, power still crackling under my skin. My clothes were ruined, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt complete. You want the royal bloodline? I said, my voice carrying a new authority that made grown wolves drop their heads in submission. You want the power that comes with it? Yes, Marcus breathed. I smiled, and it was the expression of a queen who'd finally claimed her throne. Then come and take it. The battle resumed with renewed fury, but now it was different. Now I wasn't just fighting to protect my children, I was fighting to reclaim a birthright that had been stolen from my family generations ago. And this time, I wasn't running. Chapter 8. The battle was over. Marcus lay unconscious, silver shackles binding his wrists and ankles, a precaution Lucian insisted on after what the man had put us through. Kai had fled the moment my wolf emerged, his obsession finally broken by the sight of power he could never hope to claim. The rest of Marcus's mercenaries had surrendered when faced with the combined fury of the Leaken King's guards and a newly awakened royal wolf. Now I sat on my front porch steps, watching the sun set over the mountains while my children played in the garden under the watchful eyes of a dozen royal guards. Everything looked the same as it had this morning, but nothing would ever be the same again. I was royalty. My children were the most powerful bloodline in centuries. And the man I'd spent 3 years hating was the mate the moon goddess had chosen for me. You're thinking too loud, Lucian said, settling beside me on the steps. He'd changed from his battle-torn clothes into jeans and a simple black sweater that made him look more like the man I'd met in the club and less like the terrifying king who'd arrived this morning. I have a lot to think about. We have a lot to think about, he corrected gently. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the truth had come out. 3 years of grief had carved lines around his golden eyes, and there was a hardness to his features that hadn't been there in the club. But underneath it all, I could still see traces of Gabriel, the man who'd made me feel precious for one perfect night. I'm sorry, I said quietly. For everything. For believing the lies, for keeping the children from you, for letting you grieve. Stop. His hand covered mine, warm and strong. You protected our children the only way you knew how. You believed people you trusted, people who should have protected you instead of using you. None of this is your fault. I should have questioned it. Should have. Should have what? Ignored the pack elders who raised you? Disbelieved the evidence they presented? You were 22, Arya. Grieving your parents, dealing with rejection, facing exile. You made the best decisions you could with the information you had. Tears pricked at my eyes. You spent 3 years thinking your mate was dead. And you spent 3 years thinking your mate was a monster. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. We've both lost time we can't get back. But we have the rest of our lives to make new memories. Do we? The question came out smaller than I intended. Everything's changed now. I'm apparently royal, the children are targets, and you're the Leaken King. This isn't exactly a normal situation. Nothing about us has ever been normal. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first real smile I'd seen from him since he'd arrived. A wolfless Omega and a king meeting in a neutral territory club? Falling for each other in one night? Having children who may be the most powerful wolves born in centuries? Normal went out the window a long time ago. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. When you put it like that. Mama. Ember's voice called from the garden. Look what Asher can do. We both turned to see our son standing in the middle of the flower bed, his golden eyes closed in concentration. Around him, the plants were growing, not just growing, but thriving. Flowers bloomed out of season, vines reached toward the sky, and the very air seemed to shimmer with power. That's new, I said faintly. The awakening of your wolf seems to have triggered something in them, Lucian observed, his voice carefully neutral. Their abilities are manifesting faster than expected. Is that a problem? It's a complication. He stood, offering me his hand. There are others who will want to claim them, use them. Royal bloodlines have always been targets, but children this powerful. I took his hand, letting him pull me to my feet. What are you saying? I'm saying we need to be prepared for a fight. Not just from people like Marcus, but from entire kingdoms who see our children as either threats or tools. The weight of it all pressed down on me like a physical thing. I never wanted this. Any of this. I just wanted a quiet life with my children. I know. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing away a tear I didn't realize had fallen. But sometimes fate has other plans. Fate can kiss my... A sound like silver bells filled the air, cutting off my complaint. The temperature dropped 10 degrees, and the very air began to shimmer with otherworldly light. Lucian immediately moved in front of me, his body tense for battle. What? Peace, Lucian Nightfall. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and beautiful and terrifyingly powerful. I come with words, not war. Light coalesced in the center of my garden, taking the shape of a woman who was both ageless and timeless. Her hair flowed like starlight, her eyes held the wisdom of millennia, and power radiated from her in waves that made even Lucian drop to one knee. The moon goddess. She was here, in my garden, speaking to us like we were having afternoon tea. Your Majesty, Lucian said, his voice filled with reverence and awe. Rise, King of Wolves. We have much to discuss. Her gaze shifted to me, and I felt like she was seeing straight through to my soul. And you, daughter of moon and shadow. Do you know why I have come? I have no idea, I managed, proud that my voice only shook a little. She smiled, and it was like watching the moon itself light up the night sky. To speak of prophecy. Of destiny. Of choices that will shape the fate of all supernatural beings. Prophecy? Lucian rose slowly, his expression wary. The death of Marcus and Sarah Blackwood was foretold centuries ago, she continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. Not as a tragedy to be prevented, but as a necessary sacrifice to preserve the royal bloodline long enough for their daughter to fulfill her destiny. My legs nearly gave out. You're saying my parents had to die? I am saying that every thread in the tapestry of fate led to this moment. Their exile from their packs, their meeting, their love, your birth, even their deaths, all of it was written in the stars long before any of you drew breath. That's monstrous, I whispered. That is necessity. Her expression softened slightly. Your parents knew, child. In their final moments, they understood the sacrifice they were making. They died knowing their daughter would one day have the power to save or destroy everything they held dear. Save or destroy? Lucian stepped closer to me, his protective instincts flaring. The prophecy speaks of the Silver Moon Queen, the goddess explained, her gaze never leaving my face. Born of 2 royal lines, blessed with a wolf of pure white and silver eyes. She will either unite the supernatural kingdoms in an age of peace, or she will be the catalyst for a war that destroys them all. The weight of those words crashed over me like a tidal wave. You're talking about me. I am. She gestured toward Ember and Asher, who were watching the exchange with wide, wondering eyes. And about them. Your children carry the blood of 3 royal lines, Nightfall, Moonwhisper, and Blackwood. They are the bridge between past and future, the key to either salvation or destruction. What does that mean? I demanded. It means, the goddess said, her voice gentle but implacable, that you have a choice to make. You can choose the quiet life you've built here, keep your children hidden, your power contained, your true nature suppressed. Live as Luna Sterling, healer and mother, until age takes you and your bloodline fades from memory. Or you can claim your birthright. Accept your role as the Silver Moon Queen, unite with the Leaken King, and face the darkness that even now gathers at the borders of our world. I felt Lucian tense beside me. What darkness? The goddess's expression grew grave. Ancient enemies stir, Lucian nightfall. Powers that were bound long ago are breaking free. The vampire covens grow restless, the witch circles speak of prophecy, and something older than all of them watches from the shadows. Without the united strength of the silver moon and Leaken crowns, without the power of your children when they come of age, this world will fall to chaos. And if I choose the quiet life? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then billions will suffer for your peace. The supernatural world will tear itself apart, and humanity will be caught in the crossfire. The choice stretched before me like a chasm. On one side, the life I'd built, simple, peaceful, safe. On the other, a destiny I'd never wanted, a crown I'd never asked for, and the weight of the world on my shoulders. How long do I have to decide? The choice must be made tonight, the goddess said. By dawn, the ancient bindings will be too weak to hold what stirs beneath. If you are to unite the kingdoms, it must begin now. I looked at my children, playing in the garden like this was just another evening. Looked at Lucian, who was watching me with understanding and fear and love all mixed together. Looked at the life I'd built from nothing, the safety I'd created through sacrifice and determination. Then I thought about billions of innocents, about the supernatural world tearing itself apart, about my children growing up in a world consumed by war. If I do this, I said slowly, if I accept this destiny, what happens to them? I nodded toward Ember and Asher. What happens to their childhood, their chance at a normal life? They will be raised as the royalty they are, the goddess replied. Protected, trained, loved. But yes, their lives will be shaped by duty and destiny rather than simple pleasures. And if something happens to me? If I fail? Then Lucian will protect them with his life, as will every wolf in his kingdom. The goddess's smile was sad but sure. They will not face this burden alone. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of destiny pressing down on me. When I opened them again, my decision was made. I need to know something first, I said, turning to Lucian. If I do this, if I accept this crown and this destiny, are you choosing me because the moon goddess says we're mates? Because prophecy demands it? Or because you actually want this life with me? He was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes searching my face. When he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. I fell in love with you that night in the club before I knew you were my mate. Before I knew you were royal. Before I knew about prophecies or destinies or any of this. He took my hands, his touch gentle despite the power radiating from him. I want you, Arya. Not the Silver Moon Queen, not the mother of my children, not the key to saving the world. I want you, stubborn, fierce, brave you, for the rest of my very long life. Something tight in my chest finally loosened. Even though I need you in the groin? Especially because you need me in the groin. His smile was soft and real and everything I remembered from that perfect night 3 years ago. You're magnificent, Arya Blackwood. Crown or no crown, you're the strongest person I know. I looked, a coronation ceremony binding you to the Silver Moon crown, a formal mating ceremony with the Leaken king, and the beginning of the work to unite the supernatural kingdoms against what's coming. And if we fail? Then we all fail together. Her expression was serene. But I have faith in you, daughter of moon and shadow. You were born for this moment. I took a deep breath, thinking of my parents, of the sacrifice they'd made, of the children playing in my garden who deserved a world of peace. I accept, I said, the words carrying more weight than any I'd ever spoken. I accept the crown, the destiny, all of it. The moon goddess smiled, and power flowed through the air like liquid starlight. Then by my blessing and the ancient laws, I name you Arya Blackwood, Silver Moon Queen, protector of the innocent, bridge between worlds. Light enveloped me, warm and electric and transforming. When it faded, I could feel the difference, not just power, but purpose. Not just strength, but responsibility. And you, Lucian Nightfall, the goddess continued, do you accept this woman as your queen, your mate, your equal partner in all things? I do, he said without hesitation. Then let the binding be complete. She raised her hands, and silver light poured from them, wrapping around Lucian and me like living ribbons. United in purpose, equal in power, bound by love and duty both. The light faded, leaving us standing hand in hand while the moon goddess began to fade as well. "Your real work begins now," she said, her voice growing distant. "Trust in each other, protect your children, and remember, even the darkest night ends with dawn." Then she was gone, leaving us alone in the garden with our children and a destiny that would reshape the world. "So," Lucian said after a moment of stunned silence. "I guess we're really doing this." "I guess we are." I squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his presence. "Any regrets?" "Only that it took us 3 years to get here." He lifted our joined hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to my knuckles. "Ready to save the world, Your Majesty?" I looked at Ember and Asher, who were running toward us with delighted laughter, and felt something settle into place in my soul. "With you? I'm ready for anything." Epilogue. Far to the north, in a castle built from shadow and bone, something ancient stirred. Red eyes opened in the darkness, and lips that hadn't spoken in a millennium curved into a smile. "The silver moon queen rises," it whispered to the darkness. How interesting. Around the world, vampires felt the shift in power and reached for weapons that had been stored for centuries. Witch covens gathered in emergency session, their scrying bowls showing visions of war and blood and change. Ancient treaties crumbled as old alliances reformed and new enemies revealed themselves. The supernatural world was about to change forever. And in a small mountain town, a newly crowned queen held her children close and prepared to fight for the future of them all. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.